Nowadays a project can easily include dozens, hundreds or even thousands of universes. Pharos has the right controllers for these projects. We note that occasionally a lot of time is spent setting up these projects, using a lot of manual labor. With the correct preparation, and awareness of all the tools that Pharos has to offer, the setup of even the largest and complex projects will become easy, efficient and a more manageable task. This series of videos will talk about the best possible preparation, the tools Pharos has to offer, and examples of using third-party software. Let's start with the tips for preparation. The first piece of advice is to think about fixture placement. While respecting the lighting design, try to create a logical layout of the fixtures. So what's a logical layout? That's very much dependent on the design, but often it is as simple as a repeating pattern and using straight grids. For this simple building I think we can all agree that the previous layouts were okay. But this last example is not very good. Typically it is more challenging, like this example layout. This first example is obviously not ideal. But even though this second example looks nice and repeats the same pattern, this third layout is even better as it also uses straight grids. Sometimes it is really in the layout details. At first glance this layout looks nice and consistent. But as you look closely the vertical lines are not aligned, and the repetitive part is only set per full array of fixtures. Therefore, this second example has a better layout as it is aligned, and repeats every block. It is important to state that irregular patterns can also be easily created in Pharos, but for large projects we know that it speeds up commissioning if you refrain from that. The second piece of advice is to think about the power supply and cabling order. We understand that possible cable paths can be limited, but even with this in mind, there are often multiple ways you can route the cables. The same advice as before applies here, to create a logical layout. Try to make it as repeatable and predictable as possible. It can help not to be led by system limits. Take this example with 8 rows of 22 DMX fixtures. The specification enables 32 fixtures to be connected in series. Following this limitation my cabling will look like this. This is not very easy to understand. If I was to wire this for simplicity, it will look like this. A much cleaner, simpler layout, so less likely for mistakes to happen. Additional costs for a few power supplies or nodes are typically earned back due to increased productivity in the rest of the process. One more example, let's assume that 5 tubes can be connected in series, and cabling can only come from the bottom. Instead of wiring the first 5 tubes together, it is simpler to wire 2 groups of 4, creating a regular block at the bottom. I'd like to repeat that all examples are possible with Pharos, but for large projects we know that it speeds up commissioning if you follow this advice. The third piece of advice in the preparation phase is to consider addressing. With Pharos the channels are what you pay for, and the universes are free. This means that instead of needing to use as many channels in the universe, you can start addressing from one where possible, making the addressing scheme much simpler. With nodes not more expensive than boosters, this is a quick win. In circumstances where there might be gaps in your lighting, it might be useful to add a gap in the addressing as well. To have fixtures above each other with the same address, is helpful during possible troubleshooting. And when you have multiple facades, instead of using consecutive universe numbers, you can assign meaning to them. Compare the difference in this setup. The first digit identifies the facade, the second digit the floor it is on. If there is an issue on the second facade, 5th floor, 4th fixture, I know it is universe 25, channel 13, without having to look this up in a drawing. If these 3 pieces of advice are followed, it will speed up the process of preparing larger setups, and make communicating about the project easier. In the next video I'll focus on the tools that Pharos offers to speed up commissioning of well-prepared installations.